happening. As a first step toward restoring transparency and accountability to government, we will also reverse the overclassification of government documents, and in the coming days, we are going to make public remaining records relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, his brother Robert Kennedy, as well as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and other topics of great public interest. It's all going to be released, Uncle Sam. And I will direct our military to begin construction of the great Iron Dome missile defense shield, which will all be made in the USA. And we will get wokeness the hell out of our military immediately. So they're all in prison now?
Some are out of custody.
It's ridiculous. Okay.
Lastly, sir, we have an executive order ordering the declassification of files relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades. And everything will be revealed. Okay? Give that to RFK Jr.
Yes, sir.
Okay? Okay, thank you very much.
Is this going to be different than the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which did investigate both the John F. Kennedy assassination and the King assassination?
Well, what's interesting on that specific committee is what, to my understanding, when they actually brought in expert witnesses, they weren't actually people that were in attendance to the initial autopsy at Bethesda, but also this is a bigger committee than just the JFK assassinations. We're also expanding into Epstein, COVID origins, 9/11s, and then UAPs and USOs. And so before, where we initially had some of these hearings, this is going to be an encompassing committee that's going to work directly with the White House on information that they're declassifying.
Just to be clear,
Yeah.
you mentioned the Warren, there's the Warren Committee, but also the Select.
Correct. Correct. There's actually 3 different government investigations into the JFK assassination. But again, this committee is expanding not just there, but outwards into other fields. And again, we're working directly with the White House. In previous investigations, they didn't have access to the information that we are going to have access to. And so that's a big deal, especially if you're looking at what truly happened with JFK.
Are you going to get a top secret clearance?
I already have a top secret clearance.
You do?
All members of Congress have a TSCI. The question is do we get SAP access, of which Chairman Comer has been very supportive, and we'll be getting SAP access as well. All right, one last question, then we're going to wrap it up. News Nation, let's go.
Can I ask about your relationship with whistleblowers? Is it going to be the normal process that oversight typically does, or would this be, are you going to create a separate avenue for the task force?
I mean, we're all about the normal process, but look, if you have information and it's credible, we've always approached it in that I'd like to be the person that does the interviews for it, mainly because, especially with stuff like this, we want to make sure that there's, not bad actors that are pushing false information to create a narrative that's simply not there. And so, every whistleblower that does come forward, as of right now, there's people that have been publicly out there, for example, on the JFK stuff, that were actually present in the room at the operating room where he was actually brought to right after the shooting. So we hope to bring those people in to testify. And again, these hearings will be open to the public. I am also expanding this to the entire conference. So if someone's going to take this seriously and look at it through an investigative lens and get answers for the American people, they are welcome to ask questions of the witnesses, and you guys will all receive notice of that.
And we'll work with anyone who currently works with the federal government that wants to declare whistleblower status and receive whistleblower protection, if that's what they're interested in doing. And I don't think they're going to face the type of retaliation that the previous administration gave whistleblowers, particularly the IRS whistleblowers that blew the whistle on the cover-up of the Biden family.
And I'd also like to close with this. If you are an independent investigator, we are being told that the FBI has now located thousands of pages of documents that they lost before, specifically relating to JFK. we are going to get through as much as we can. We have a great team of attorneys. We have a great team of investigators looking into this, but it doesn't mean that we won't accept help from the public. And so we will be setting up a place for collection for people to present information. But again, this is about transparency. The government works for us. There have been people, I think, in power for too long that try to silo us and keep us in the dark, but that stops today. You're seeing that same message come out of the White House, out of the CIA, the FBI, and every other agency in between. So we are very happy to have the support of all of those individuals, happy to have the support of Chairman Comer and Speaker Johnson. And if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to Oversight Comms, and we'd be happy to answer those at that time. Thank you, guys.
To end it once and for all. President Trump also promised maximum transparency and a commitment to rebuild the trust of the American people in our intelligence community. Part of that promise was to fully release previously classified records related to the assassination of former President John F. Kennedy, and he made that happen yesterday. This historic release consisted of approximately 80,000 pages of previously classified records that are now published. The records are available to access either online at archives.gov/JFK or in person, accessible to the American people at the National Archives in College Park, Maryland. Records that are currently only available for in-person viewing are being digitized and will be uploaded in the coming days.
We have conducts our family, so thank you. Agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. And I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of our witnesses who are here today. I also believe I want to say that the American people deserve transparency, not just on JFK files, MLK, Epstein list, all the things. I also want to say I'm grateful to President Trump for keeping good on his promise for transparency. This is a man who literally also took a bullet for his country. And I agree with you, Mr. Stone, on your testimony and your opening statement. Giving our country, giving our democracy meaning and a purpose for a nation. And that, to me, personally means getting to the bottom of the truth, getting the truth out of whatever three-letter agency is hiding information, whether it's from Congress, whether it's from the American people. But sunshine literally is the best medicine. And we've just seen over the last few years, regardless of your politics, but we saw 51 intelligence leaders sign a letter saying the Hunter Biden laptop was fake. Turns out that was a cover-up. We saw a presidential candidate and Donald Trump spied on by the political opposition. We saw Biden's health care, his health. The previous administration lied to the American people about the president's health. They called his falling down cheap fakes. We saw the origins of COVID covered up by a government. We saw documents after documents, hidden from the American people. Donald Trump was treated differently when they found documents at Mar-a-Lago versus the way Joe Biden was treated when they found documents in his garage. The government tried to cover it up, tried to cover from him. We were lied to about drones just in the last few months. And so when we talk about this, the deep state, not only was it around during JFK's assassination, but it's here today. It is right before our eyes. And they are doing this in real time with regards to the Epstein list, which the government still has not released today, and the American people deserve to know who rich and powerful is on that list and who the government is covering up for. So for decades, we've seen this happen, and I'll get to a few questions. Mr. Morley, I want to start with you first. You said, according to your testimony, in asking what did the CIA know and when did they know it, what do you think that is? What is the answer to that question?
I want to preface my remarks by saying I'm a liberal Democrat, and I don't shy away from that. That's part of my reporting, and that's part of my reputation for straight shooting. What did the CIA know about Lee Harvey Oswald, and when did they know it? Mm-hmm. A whole lot. 198 pages worth of information were on the CIA's desk when President Kennedy left for Dallas. So that foundational fact should guide us in understanding what happened.
So who do you think fired the shot?
I don't know.
You don't know, but you don't believe it was Lee Harvey Oswald?
Oswald was not the intellectual author of Kennedy's death, even if he fired a gun that day.
Who do you think was the intellectual author of Kennedy's death?
Kennedy's enemies high in his own government is as specific as I can be based on the available evidence. Probably CIA and Pentagon.
How long had the CIA been surveying Lee Harvey Oswald before the assassination attempt?
4 years.
4 years. And what are some of the highlights of the CIA's pre-assassination file on Lee Harvey Oswald?
They started reading his mail on November 9th, 1959, and they intercepted a number of letters between him and his mother. Those letters were forwarded to James Angleton in the summer of 1962. In the summer of 1963, Oswald attempted to infiltrate the CIA's favorite Cubans in New Orleans. He was arrested. The FBI sent reports on Oswald's arrest to Angleton's staff. They knew that he had attempted to infiltrate a CIA-funded group, that he had been arrested. And then they learned that he had attempted to travel to Cuba, a violation of U.S. law at the time, and he had made contact with a KGB officer in Mexico City.
Okay, Mr. Morley, did the CIA or FBI have intelligence prior to the assassination of President Kennedy that Lee Harvey Oswald intended to kill him?
No.
Did the FBI did not either?
No.
No one did. And then how do we, Mr. Davison, how do we make sure the government is more transparent with Congress? You have 20 seconds. Good luck.
I think in general, the most important thing is to provide the resources to agencies to process public records requests or requests from Congress so that this information can actually be reviewed and disclosed in a timely fashion, whether you are concerned about the truth of the statements that you raised at the top of your presentation, or if perhaps you want to understand more about the Trump administration's hateful campaign against trans individuals. Either way, you would require more resources for public records disclosure and requests.
Okay, and just for clarification, Mr. Morley, this is about as nonpartisan as this committee gets. So, good job. Thank you. I'll now recognize Congressman Christian Morphy for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. I now recognize myself for some questions. Mr. Morley, why do you say that the Oswald file was sitting on the desk of James Angleton a week before the assassination? Can you really prove that?
Yes, I can. In the Oswald file, on page 254 and on page 275, you'll see a routing slip on 2 FBI reports about Oswald. And on November 15th, 1963, and November 14th, 1963, you'll see the initials JAR on the routing slip. That stands for Jane Atherton Roman. She was the liaison officer for Mr. Angleton. So when she signed for those 2 FBI reports, we have proof positive that they were on Mr. Angleton's desk.
Are you saying that the 3 men, Angleton, Helms, and Joanides, plotted to kill the president?
No, I am not saying that. I'm saying that they were engaged in covert activities related to Lee Harvey Oswald that have never been disclosed. And that's the imperative for the task force, to obtain those records of that secret operation.
Real quick, I'd like to enter into the record a document that was actually one of these declassified documents of the CIA rejecting the lone gunman theory. Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Morley, who was George Joanides, and why do you emphasize the importance of getting this file?
George Joanides was a career CIA officer. In 1963, he was chief of the Covert Action Branch of the Miami Station. His agents had contact with Oswald before the assassination. His agents in the top secret program, AMSPEL, generated propaganda about Oswald's pro-Castro activities both before and after the assassination. When Mr. Joanides was questioned by congressional investigators here on Capitol Hill in 1978, he was asked who was running these Cuban students who had all this contact with Oswald. The investigators had no idea that they were looking at the answer to their question. And Mr. Joanides, who had been running that Cuban student group, told congressional investigators, "I don't know. I'll get back to you." That was obstruction of Congress. That was an obstruction of an investigation of the president's assassination. His records have never been fully released by the Central Intelligence Agency, and they obviously should be.
Mr. Morley, you actually had written an article specifically addressing a whistleblower that had reports at the CIA potentially showing information that Oswald was in Mexico City. Can you speak more to that?
I was approached a few years ago by a man who had worked inside the CIA, had a very high security clearance. And in 2018, he came to me and said he was concerned that there was a JFK assassination document that he had read while he was working at the CIA, and he was afraid that it would never become public. The man was taking considerable legal risk by talking to me. He was talking about classified or potentially classified information. So I published his story last year without his name, which is not something that I usually do. I don't like stories with anonymous sources, but I felt that it was important to get out, and he felt it was important too. I have spoken with him, and he says he is willing to come public and tell his name under his own story with assurances that he will not face legal retaliation. I hope that's something that can be arranged in the near future.
Thank you. Mr. Stone, if you could for a moment, you had mentioned earlier about some anomalies in the autopsy. Would you be able to speak to that? I have about 1 minute and 19 left.
One of the things that we did in our documentary, JFK Revisited in 2021, was show as much as we could about the autopsy, including the fact that there are 40 people still alive, as far as I know, who witnessed at Parkland and at Bethesda a large gaping wound in the back of President Kennedy's right head, indicating a shot from the front that blew out the rear of his, and they all point, if you look, there's a picture, they all point to the same place on camera, right here, in the back of his head. That's one very disturbing point. Additionally, there's a lot of inconsistencies in what was seen and done. The tracking of the bullet, the concept of a magic bullet, which deserves a lot of deserves your re-examination. And I think Jim is more expert in this than I. If I can point to him, he's my researcher.
Well, thank you. I'm sure that will be in the next line of questioning. I'd like to now recognize Mr. Garcia for 5 minutes. Green. After 5 minutes, light will turn yellow, and after 6 minutes, you'll get gavelled. I now recognize Mr. Morley to give an opening statement.
Thank you to all the task force, the House Task Force on Declassification. It's an honor to testify before you. It's a solemn responsibility to report on the disturbing new revelations that have emerged from the newest JFK files. And it is a grave matter to assert that CIA officers were culpable or complicit in the death of a president. So I want fact checkers to have all the evidence that I'm used to support my testimony today. I speak with the benefit of 3 decades of reporting on the JFK story. My first article on the role of the CIA in the events that led to the assassination was published in the Washington Post 30 years ago this week. As I pursued this story, I practiced the tried and true techniques that I learned at the Post. Knock on doors, get 2 sources, follow the money, start with the cover-up and proceed to the crime, and always ask the question, what did they know and when did they know it? I did not start with a conspiracy theory, and I did not go looking for a smoking gun. I started with an open mind and looked for a fact pattern. As I interviewed and reported and researched on this story and the role of the CIA, I consistently avoided judgment on who was responsible, individually or institutionally. My research and reporting simply didn't give me a clear answer to the question, who killed JFK? What was clear over time is a new fact pattern. In the spring of 2023, the CIA fully declassified for the first time its pre-assassination file on Lee Harvey Oswald, the accused assassin who denied killing the president and was killed himself in police custody before he could defend himself. I have a copy here of the CIA's pre-assassination file on Lee Harvey Oswald, and I'm submitting it for the record. The declassified Oswald file runs to, and fact checkers can confirm this, 198 pages. In the fall of 1963, in November of 1963, this file was held in the office of James Angleton, counterintelligence chief at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, not 5 miles from the White House where President Kennedy lived and worked. To be sure, the declassified Oswald file is not a smoking gun. I showed it to journalists whose judgment I trust, and they shrugged. They said this is evidence of incompetence. CYA, they said, cover your ass. I didn't quite believe that, but I couldn't prove them wrong until March 18th. That was the day that the National Archives began posting long secret JFK assassination records that had been withheld from public view for decades. I started by looking at 9 declassified documents about Mr. Angleton. He was the man who compiled the Oswald file. And when I came to a long secret transcript of Angleton's testimony to the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1978, my reservations about passing judgment on the responsibility vanished. One newly declassified passage showed that Angleton had lied under oath about his surveillance of Oswald's correspondence while he lived in the Soviet Union from 1959 to 1962. And that, for me, was a tipping point. The transcript, which the CIA withheld from public view for half a century, confirmed a disturbing fact. James Angleton is the 3rd senior CIA officer known to have lied under oath about what they knew about the alleged assassin Oswald before JFK was killed. The first was Deputy Director Richard Helms. He lied to the Warren Commission in May 1964 when he said under oath the CIA had only, quote, minimal information about Oswald before JFK was killed. 198 pages of information cannot be truthfully described as minimal. The second CIA officer who lied was George Joannides, chief of the Covert Action Branch of the Miami Station in 1963. His agents in the top-secret AMSPEL program generated propaganda about Oswald's pro-Castro activities both before and after the president was killed. 15 years later, in 1978, the CIA inserted Joannides into the House JFK investigation, and he blocked any investigation of contacts between Oswald and his AMSPEL agents. Obstructing Congress cannot be considered evidence of incompetence. And this is what I believe in summary. One false statement might be incompetence. A second false statement might be CYA for the first false statement. But 3 false statements by top CIA officers about Kennedy's accused killer, that is a pattern. It's a pattern of misconduct. It's a pattern of malfeasance. If 3 police officers lie about their knowledge of a homicide defendant, that cannot be considered exculpatory evidence. To the contrary, it shows guilty knowledge and criminal culpability. It is, in a word, incriminating. The new fact pattern leads to a new conclusion. We know now what they knew about Oswald and when they knew it. We know now that Richard Helms, James Angleton, and George Joannides were responsible for or complicit in the death of the president, either by criminal negligence or covert action. My recommendations to the task force are 1, secure and release the personnel file of George Joannides, and 2, ask the CIA to provide a public statement answering the question, why did these 3 men lie to JFK investigators? The answers will help fulfill the task force goal, the president's goal, and the people's goal of full and complete JFK disclosure. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stone, if you could for a moment, you had mentioned earlier about some anomalies in the autopsy. Would you be able to speak to that? I have about 1:19 left.
One of the things that we did in our documentary JFK revisited in 2021 was show as much as we could about the autopsy, including the fact that there are 40 people still alive, as far as I know, who witnessed at Parkland and at Bethesda a large gaping wound in the back of President Kennedy's right head, indicating a shot from the front that blew out the rear of his, and they all point, if you look, there's a picture, they all point to the same place on camera, right here, in the back of his head. That's one very disturbing point. Additionally, there's a lot of inconsistencies in what was seen and done. The tracking of the bullet, the concept of a magic bullet, which deserves a lot of deserves your reexamination. And I think Jim is more expert in this than I. If I can point to him, he's my researcher.
Well, thank you. I'm sure that will be in the next line of questioning. I'd like to now recognize Mr. Garcia for.
Thank you, Madam Chair. President Kennedy's grandson, Jack Schlossberg, said conspiracies surrounding JFK's death have shifted focus away from the important lessons of his life and the critical issues of the moment. So I'd like to focus a little bit on some of those lessons and issues. Mr. D. Eugenio, it's the start of baseball season. Go Cubs. So let's begin with JFK's 1960 letter to Jackie Robinson, in which JFK highlighted Robinson's role in the civil rights struggle. JFK said, quote, "I believe I understand and appreciate your role in continuing the struggle to fulfill America's promise of equal opportunity for all. Just last month, President Trump bizarrely ordered DOD to purge its website of all references to black history, black veterans, and even the reference to Jackie Robinson's own military service. In response, Mr. D. Eugenio, you posted that what Trump did was, quote, really sick. That's what you said, and that's what you believe, right, sir? Yes?
Did I say that?
Yeah, you did. And
okay, I'm sorry. I don't recall saying that. Okay, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Okay.
Yeah, it's
I
right
wish
here.
you'd have
This is
given
your
me
tweet.
before so I could have looked at it.
Mr. Morley, you said that JFK, quote, took great risks on behalf of all Americans in resisting the forces of militarism and racism.
Yes.
Donald Trump, on the other hand, recently eliminated, believe it or not, the prohibition on federal contractors using or maintaining racially segregated facilities. JFK would have rejected what Trump recently did, correct?
You know, I was invited here to talk about the JFK files, and I don't want to make a partisan political issue of it. Like I said, I'm a liberal Democrat, and if in general I had to choose between a conservative Republican like Donald Trump and a liberal Democrat like JFK, I would choose JFK.
Well, let me talk about USAID for a second, because that was something that JFK actually established. Sir, recently, USAID is now being shuttered. Again, that is something that is a very important part of his legacy, and that's something that he would have opposed, obviously, correct?
I think President Kennedy would have said that no government agency is sacrosanct, and I'm sure he would have said that any federal agency that should be abolished should be done in consultation between the President and Congress.
And that hasn't been done here, yes, sir?
Not that I know of.
Let me turn to another topic. Mr. Stone, some of your films, such as Platoon and Born on the 4th of July, were inspired by your own military experiences in the Army when you deployed to Vietnam in the 60s, right?
That's correct.
We have this picture here of you in Vietnam.
Thank you.
I thank you deeply for your service. We actually found a picture of you in Vietnam, and you were awarded the Bronze Star for Valor, correct?
That's correct.
You've written that your Bronze Star was because of your actions during a, quote, mean little ambush, which had cost you a lieutenant, a sergeant, and even your scout dog, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. What was you saying?
He said, did it cost you a lieutenant and your scout dog, the ambush?
No, that's another incident, sir. That was later on in another infantry unit. That was the reason that led to my Bronze Star. Bronze Star came in August of that year. This wound occurred in October of '67.
Can I ask you about that? It's ambushes like this where sometimes people are waiting opportunistically to fire upon you, but sometimes they have some type of information that allows them to lie in wait for a surprise attack. And part of that information could be your whereabouts or the timing of your arrival, correct?
You're talking about friendly fire or fragging? Is this what you're...
Ambush from the enemy.
Ambushed, to be ambushed by your own man? Your own troops? Is that what you're saying?
Ambushed by the enemy, the adversary.
The adversary. Okay. Well, I'm a little confused, but I just want to make the point that, yes, there was a tremendous amount of friendly fire casualties in Vietnam, and there's in any war, I believe. In my experience, 10% doesn't even describe it. I think it's closer to 15 or 20% in terms of friendly fire deaths and wounds.
Yeah, Mr. Stone, we'd like to thank you for your service to this country. You are a war hero. You have a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart, and I think this committee reflects that. Thank you. The chair would like to now recognize Mr. Burchett. Chair would like to now recognize Mr. Burchett.
Thank you, Chair Lady. For over 50 years, the assassination of President Kennedy has been shrouded in secrecy and corruption. The American people have been lied to repeatedly by this federal government. President Trump's executive orders declassified the critical documents, I think, is a step in the right direction. But Congress must ensure that the bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. don't get away with what they've done, and they don't get in the way of transparency. Mr. Stone, I know you've talked about chain of custody, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on some of the NBC videos. And I know that since you've already talked about your service to our great country, from '67 to '68, you were twice wounded in action. You received a Bronze Star, a Purple Heart, an Air Medal, and the Combat Infantry Badge. And we salute you for your service, sir. Today is the 80th anniversary of the invasion of Okinawa, and that's an island my dad was on. And he told me, he said the Purple Heart was one medal he was glad he never got. Mr. Stone, I'm going to ask for the indulgence of the chair lady and the members if I could just yield my time to you and you to discuss anything you would like to pertaining to this subject, and to ask any of the other men up here on the dais with you any questions you would like.
Well, I'd like to point out that in our film, JFK Revisited 2021, which is an important, I hope members of the committee have a chance to look at it, because it is a follow-up to the original film, and it's a documentary made with Mr. D. Eugenio as a writer, in which we take the evidence from the AARB and we examine as much of it as we can. Included in that is the concept of chain of custody. We interviewed Henry Lee, who is one of the country's leading, what would you call him?
He's the leading criminalist in America.
Okay, a criminalist, whatever that. Okay, he was saying to us repeatedly, and he's on camera, a chain of custody has to go from the scene of the crime to the courtroom. Otherwise, it doesn't. You cannot bring the charge on Oswald or anybody. Well, that doesn't exist in this case. We went through this in the documentary. The rifle itself is not the one that is described in the film. It was shown of a man, a detective walking out with a rifle in his arms raised. That rifle does not resemble the one that was bought by Oswald out of the Chicago, supposedly bought by Oswald. Hidell was his name.
The one held up was a Mauser, and the one he allegedly shot him with was a Mannlicher Italian carbine, I believe.
The difference is that the one in evidence is longer. It's about 4 inches longer. It has a sling to it, and it has a screw in the butt of the rifle, which I consulted with some rifle experts, and they said Oswald could not have done that by himself. All right. So those are the differences between the one that the Warren Commission says Oswald actually purchased versus the one that they put into evidence.
No rifle and no bullets, I said. Now, the bullets is even more ridiculous. As you know, there's been a long amount of controversy about the CE-399, the so-called magic bullet. which came out apparently undamaged after wounding 7 or 8 wounds. We don't have a chain of custody proving that those bullets were ever used. So those are not, they do not match the ones at the 6th floor that were pictured.
And that's the bullet that was found on the gurney, correct? Beside one of the bodies?
Yes, except we don't know which gurney it was found on, okay? And then if you go to the chain of custody from, well, let me use this as an example. According to the evidence, all right, that bullet was turned over to the FBI at 9:20 that night. Okay, well, here's the problem. Frazier, who was the FBI ballistics expert, had the bullet at 7:35. How on earth can you have a bullet that hasn't been delivered into the White House? Because that's where the exchange took place. So that's one of the big problems. And I could go on for 2 hours on what's wrong with CE 399 as a piece of evidence. I don't think any district attorney in the United States would even try and submit CE 399 because it would blow up in your face. Concerning the medical that he mentioned, in the House Select Committee volumes, volume 7, page 37, you will see a quote saying that the witnesses at Bethesda did not see this blown out back of the skull, which the witnesses at Parkland Hospital saw, which is strongly indicative of a shot from the front, all right? Well, this is what happened. When the ARB declassified all the medical files from the House Select Committee on Assassinations, that turned out to be a lie, because as many people at Bethesda saw this blown out back of the skull as saw it at Parkland. There's, I think, 21 and 21, so you have a grand total of 42 people. Can 42 people all be wrong? You know? I mean, that just defies imagination.
435 people are often wrong, but that's Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Burchett. Ms. Lee, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, I yield.
I now recognize Ms. Crockett for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. There often isn't too much agreement when it comes specifically to Congress, let alone to this particular committee. And I will tell you that y'all have given me all the feels as someone who had an opportunity to practice law. So when you start talking about things such as chain of custody, these are the things that I used to challenge all the time as a defense attorney. And the reason that I had to make sure that I was here and specifically on today is because on November 22nd, 1963, Texas 30th Congressional District, the district that I represent, became the site of one of the most tragic events in American political history. After being struck by the bullets of an assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, President Kennedy was rushed to Parkland Hospital, where hardworking physicians from the UT Southwestern Medical Center worked tirelessly to resuscitate him. During the 48 hours between the moment President Kennedy was shot to the moment when Oswald was pronounced dead, Texas 30th Congressional District became the temporary seat of the U.S. government, the temporary seat of the Texas government, the site of the 35th president's death, and the center of the world's attention. While I value government accountability and transparency like most of my colleagues, nearly all the previously classified JFK assassination files are now public and show no evidence of a CIA conspiracy. But what I find funny about this hearing is that the Republicans are here relitigating whether CIA agents lied 60 years ago, but aren't doing anything about the CIA director lying to Congress just 6 days ago. We should be having a hearing on the fact that the unqualified Secretary of Defense and other senior Trump officials were carelessly discussing classified military plans over an unsecure Signal group chat. And instead of providing oversight over the administration's handling of classified information, the Republicans have spent a week trying to convince the American people that the military plans were not classified. So instead of giving a platform to conspiracy theories, and let me be clear, there are holes. I don't want y'all to think that I don't think that there are holes. But when we're looking back, we need to look back so that we can look forward and hopefully do better. So that is why I am bringing us to present day. It might be helpful if we walk everyone through the classification and declassification process, since the Republicans have decided to do it this way. Federal law defines classified information as, quote, information or material requiring a specific degree of protection against unauthorized disclosure for reasons of national security. Federal law also defines disclosure as, quote, communicating, providing, transmitting, transferring, conveying, publishing, or otherwise making available. Congress has long enacted classified information laws that forbid the disclosure of classified information. Separately, Executive Order 13526 puts in place a uniform system for classifying and declassifying national security information. According to the executive order, classified information includes the following, quote, military plans, weapons, systems, or operations, intelligence activities, including covert actions, intelligence sources or methods, and foreign relations or foreign activities of the United States, including confidential sources. Under the, quote, general responsibilities provision of the executive order, quote, heads of agencies shall ensure the agency record system are designed and maintained to optimize the appropriate sharing and safeguarding of classified information and help facilitate its declassification, not to mention that it's also illegal under federal law to destroy classified documents and information. So this administration is breaking law by discussing classified information over unsecure channels and breaking the law by destroying the evidence of the conversations. We wouldn't be able to have today's hearing if the CIA destroyed the records associated with the assassination of President Kennedy. So, Mr. Morley, wouldn't it be impossible for you to accurately report on the JFK assassination if the CIA and FBI deleted all documents like the Trump administration officials plan to do in the Signal group chat?
The CIA destroyed a lot of records related to President Kennedy's assassination. Again, I didn't come here to engage in a debate about partisan politics. I think everybody agrees about the JFK files. And I want to endorse Mr. Davison's call for full funding of public records offices in the government.
I understand. And Mr. Stone, wouldn't it be nearly impossible to produce a film if there was not a legitimate record of these events taking place?
Well, that's a very good question. Not really. Oh, I'm sorry. That's a very good question. Not really. I mean, the events unfolded as they did, and right away, from day one, people were pointing out inconsistencies way before there was an official record of this.
Thank you. With that, I will yield.
Mr. Morley, Mr. Stone, Mr. Eugenio, I just want to say thank you for being here, taking time out of your day, and I want to apologize that not everyone on this hearing seems to want to use this time to its fullest extent. And so
excuse me, Chairwoman Luna, Ranking Member Garcia, and members of the task force, thank you for the opportunity to testify today about the privacy, transparency, and accountability issues raised by the recent release of documents from the President Kennedy assassination records collection. My name is John Davison, and I am the Director of Litigation and Senior Counsel at the Electronic Privacy Information Center, or EPIC. EPIC is an independent nonprofit research organization established in 1994 to protect privacy, freedom of expression, and democratic values in the information age. As this task force knows well, the assassination of President Kennedy was an event of surpassing historical and political significance, one that has engendered more than 60 years of investigation, analysis, and debate. Today's hearing highlights the critical role that open government laws, and in particular the JFK Records Act, have played in informing that discourse. As the Supreme Court has written, open government laws are one of the key mechanisms for holding the governors accountable to the governed. With that in mind, Congress has rightly established a robust array of public disclosure requirements for federal entities, including the Freedom of Information Act, the Federal Advisory Committee Act, and the JFK Records Act. Having spent decades to secure the transparency of government records, EPIC firmly supports the objectives of the JFK Records Act and the fulfillment of its disclosure mandate. But given that many federal records contain sensitive personal information, Congress has also made it clear that government transparency must be balanced with the protection of privacy. Disclosing personal information is inherently invasive and can expose individuals to a broad spectrum of secondary harms, including identity theft, fraud, reputational harm, psychological harm, stalking, harassment, doxing, and vigilantism. Accordingly, the FOIA, the FACA, and the JFK Records Act all establish that the disclosure of records is not required to the extent that such dissemination would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. Together with the Privacy Act, these provisions ensure in principle that the federal government only disseminates personal information to the extent that the public interest in disclosure outweighs the privacy interest of the individual to whom the information pertains. To fulfill this dual mandate of transparency and privacy protection, federal agencies consistently conduct a detailed review of documents prior to release, redacting personal information, or sometimes withholding records in full, where disclosure would cause unwarranted privacy harm. For example, when processing FOIA requests, the National Archives is ordinarily careful to withhold records about a living individual that, if released, would cause a clearly unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. In the past, NARA has also conducted extensive reviews of documents subject to the JFK Records Act to identify and request the withholding of any Social Security numbers or financial information of living persons. By all appearances, these procedures and safeguards were completely bypassed in last month's hurried release of 60,000 pages from the JFK Records collection, which led to the public disclosure of Social Security numbers and other private information of more than 400 former congressional staffers and other former officials, some of them still living. This shocking violation of privacy has compounded a national trauma and distracted from Congress's stated goal of informing the public through the JFK Records Act. Security experts, as well as those directly harmed by the breach, have deemed it outrageous, sloppy, unprofessional, astonishing, foolish, incompetent, egregious, almost criminal, and a breach of a first-grade elementary level rule of security. NARA has reportedly begun to reach out to individuals affected by the breach, and the White House has promised free credit monitoring services and new Social Security numbers to those affected. But these steps are too little, too late. The bell can't be unrung. There are several lessons to draw from this episode. First, Congress has mandated that agencies take steps to prevent unwarranted invasions of privacy resulting from records disclosures for good reason. This incident illustrates why those procedures must be followed, even when logistically or politically inconvenient. Congress should explore updates to the FOIA, the Privacy Act, and other federal record statutes to ensure that such procedures are both readily enforceable and followed without exception. Second, while prompt disclosure of public records is essential, fire drills that make it impossible to ensure the redaction of sensitive personal information are a threat to privacy and to the public. Although it is difficult to see how any agency could have completed an ongoing review of 60,000 pages within the 24 hours abruptly allotted, this incident serves as a reminder of the need to adequately fund public records offices throughout the federal government to ensure that they can carry out their weighty and growing responsibilities in a timely fashion. Third, this breach, while deeply serious, is a drop in the bucket compared to the wrongful disclosure of personal information now occurring within and between federal agencies, failing to rein in the ongoing government-wide misuse of systems of records by largely unaccountable actors risks far more dangerous consequences. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Mr. Morley, Mr. Stone, Mr. Eugenio, I just want to say thank you for being here, taking time out of your day, and I want to apologize that not everyone on this hearing seems to want to use this time to its fullest extent. And so I want to start by saying thank you, Mr. Stone. Shortly after your film's release, the United States Congress passed the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992, and you did something that I don't know that I've done in my career. It passed unanimously. I want to give you an opportunity to talk about how it felt and the impact of having a movie that not only has spurred multiple hearings of Congress, but unanimously passed a bill through Congress.
Sir, I was at the time, I was told that by many people who were involved, and they were very happy and thought that this was a great public duty. I didn't feel that way. I felt like I was being skewered the whole time in the media. And many people volunteered, important people volunteered negative impressions that were not based, I don't think, on reality. That the people didn't even bother to see the film, for example, and were saying that he's got Lyndon Johnson and all that involved and blah, 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 and he's got 55 people, different agencies involved. I mean, this is nonsense.
Well, I just want to say on behalf of the American people, thank you for what you did, because
thank you.
Because of your work,
That's
we
wonderful.
now have documents like this one. Madam Chair, I'd like to enter into the record a CIA document that ends in number 10056.
Without objection, so ordered.
In this document, it describes that, it dispels the narrative that when Oswald visited Mexico City, that he only met with Sylvia Duran. In fact, in this document, he met with a KGB official. Remarkably, the individual by the name of Kostakov was actually a member of KGB and Department 13.
Yeah.
Because of your work, we now have this kind of evidence. He actually met with a member of the KGB who was part of the Wet Works, the assassination team. I also want to say thank you because of your work, we have another document that I want to enter into the record. This is ends in 10191.
Without objection, so ordered.
In this document, we have a testimony that an individual named Francisco Tamayo, otherwise known as the El Mexicano, accompanied Lee Harvey Oswald into Mexico City for his meetings in both the Cuban embassy and the Russian embassy. Mr. Stone, I'm shocked that this narrative is only really been something that we've seen only in the last few years. You would think that the Warren report would have reported the fact that Oswald had met with a KGB individual in the Department 13 of, basically the assassination division, and that he was accompanied by an individual known as El Mexicano that later an FBI report indicated that this individual, El Mexicano, was captured in Venezuela for attempting to assassinate another individual. Mr. Morley, I want to ask you about Mr. Angleton. Who is Mr. Angleton?
James Angleton was the chief of CIA counterintelligence from 1954 to 1974. In that period, he was one of the most influential men in the CIA, serving under four different directors.
And what did he tell the Warren Commission in 1963 and 64?
When the Warren Commission came asking Angleton for information about Oswald's visit to Mexico City, Angleton wrote a memo or told his aides that he wanted to, and this is a quote, wait out the commission. He did not cooperate, and like like Richard Helms, they both basically fooled the Warren Commission and deceived them about what they knew about Oswald.
And later, we now have, because of the work of Mr. Stone and others, we have Mr. Angleton's testimony that he gave to the Assassination Committee, the House Select Committee on Assassinations. What insights did we gain from that?
This document was not fully declassified until March 18th, and in there we learned for the first time that Angleton had lied to the House Select Committee when he testified in October 1978 in an office building about 2 blocks from here. And that was never known before until March 18th that he had done that, and that is one of the most significant revelations to come out of this. People will say, oh, well, there's nothing new here. No, there's something new here. The New York Times, the Washington Post have never reported that that 3 top CIA officials lied to the JFK investigators.
Yeah, and the fact that we have 3 CIA officials that lied to Congress for decades, and that it took decades to get documents that should have been released that had very compelling information, and it took 60 years to get that information released, is appalling. And that's why I want to say thank you to all of your work in helping to get this information released.
Thank you.
I'd like to now recognize Mr. Crane for 5 minutes. Oh, sorry. Unanimous consent Without objection, so ordered.
So I have some more documents I want to enter into the record. Here's from the National Archives, a NARA letter dated 2017 that the CIA withheld docs regardless of the JFK Act.
Without objection, so ordered.
Another document from the archives that the Warren Commission did not have original classification authority.
Without objection, so ordered.
And then another document from the archives that the FBI's reasoning for redactions dated 2017 in the NARA letter.
Without objection, so ordered. I'd like.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again to our witnesses for all of your testimony. Just want to run through a few questions that might bring some clarity on some of the opening statements. And I do want to just recognize also and restate the concerns that we should all have about overclassification over the last few decades, especially when it came to the CIA and the FBI. Mr. Morley, I know you didn't say this explicitly in your testimony. I just want to clarify. I think it's good for the record. Now, we know that your research, of course, is very focused on what the U.S. government knew about Lee Harvey Oswald. I think you made that also very clear. You believe Lee Harvey Oswald fired the shots who killed President Kennedy. Is that correct, sir?
He was not solely responsible for the president's...
The microphone.
No, I don't believe that President Lee Harvey Oswald shot President Kennedy.
No.
I don't think the evidence supports that.
You don't think the evidence supports that he fired the shots?
He might have fired a gun. He was not the intellectual author of the president's death.
Okay, and I wanted to clarify because I think the firing of the shots, I just wanted to clarify that you do believe that he fired the shots.
No, I don't.
Okay.
That has not been determined by the evidence.
Okay. Well, I want to just get you to clarify that. Now, I want to also just say a few points. You, Mr. Morley, you have said that the CIA was not forthcoming with Congress in past investigations. Correct, sir?
Yes.
Okay. I know you have said that you also you have said that CIA counterintelligence was also either new information or could have been responsible in some sort of broader plot. Is that correct, sir?
Correct.
Okay. But you have said, I think, just to correct what you said, you have said, though, that there is no direct evidence as of today that the CIA committed the assassination. Is that correct?
I would say that the fact pattern that has emerged in last month shows culpability or complicity in the president's death.
But no direct evidence. Is that correct, sir?
We have very direct evidence of the CIA's surveillance of Oswald.
No, I'm not asking about that. I agree with you, sir. I mean direct evidence that the CIA is connected to the assassination.
All of these events connect the CIA to the assassination.
And I understand that, sir. I'm just telling you my interpretation of what's been presented is that I have not seen direct evidence. I'm not saying, by the way, that there haven't been, that the CIA or the FBI haven't been involved in a variety of covering up information in the past. We know that to be true, but I just want to make sure that I'm very clear that I have not seen direct evidence yet.
Okay.
Thank you. I want to just recognize again, the overclassification issue is an issue, and I appreciate that clarification. I also think it's important that we're very clear with the public that no one should be defending the CIA or the FBI, particularly from this period of time. I think they were involved in very questionable practices, not just on this issue, but on a variety of issues, so I understand that. I want to also just note that we should follow, of course, the facts wherever they go. Mr. Morley, in the run-up to this hearing, I know that there was some public reporting about this video that has been referenced. It's never before seen video of the shooting. Now, that video itself is not a secret. I mean, JFK researchers have known about this video for a few years. Is that correct?
For decades, yes.
Okay. And the film is not definitive about Oswald's whereabouts at the time of the incident.
No, it is not.
Okay, and it's not regarded as overly important by serious JFK researchers. Would you agree with that?
Correct.
Okay. And it has never been a factor in major analysis in the causes of JFK's assassination. Is that also correct?
Not in mine and not in any of the researchers I work with.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's important to clarify that because I think there's a lot of speculation and interest in the video, but I think we should be very clear about what the video actually is. Also, I know as it relates to the rollout of the JFK files, it also included a lot of, I think, personal information. And Mr. Davison, I just want to turn to you for a minute. One of my concerns, of course, has been that a lot of personal information was actually released and has actually caused harm to certain folks. Can you just kind of speak to some of the concerns about the way that was released? That would be helpful.
Sure. So the National Archives was aware, as was the National Security Council from public reporting, that these records contained a substantial amount of personal information, including Social Security numbers, which are consistently redacted in public records requests and in prior disclosures under the JFK Records Act, and proceeded to complete this rollout with a sort of abrupt 24-hour deadline at the end without taking the steps that are ordinarily taken to redact that information and to ensure that privacy is protected. And as I indicated in my initial statement, there's a whole host of harms that can come from that. Obviously, it's deeply inconvenient for your Social Security number to be published. It is, the White House has said they will issue new Social Security numbers, but there's a lot of harm that can happen in the meantime. And updating that information for an individual is tremendously complicated.
Thank you. My time is concluded. So I just want to add to that point that as we declassify and work with the archives and others, we've got to make sure that people's personal information, of course, isn't being used in a way that's negative and conducts their family. So thank you.
Agreed.
Okay, we are going to move to Dr. Curtis while you guys work through the mic issue, but Mr. Bolden, please be assured we will be coming back to you. So we'll just pass. We will be coming back, though. Dr. Curtis, if you can.
Thank you. My story begins when I left my office to go to get something to eat before I did surgery. And to do that, I had to go by the emergency room. And when I went by the emergency room, a policeman came out of the door into the emergency room, grabbed my shoulder, and he said, "Are you a doctor?" Can everybody hear?
Yes, sorry, Dr. Curtis. Mr. Bolden, we can hear you now. Your microphone's working, but Dr. Curtis is doing their opening statement. So if you could just pause real quick and then put yourself on mute. Thank you. Dr. Curtis, please continue.
All right. So the policeman asked me if I was a doctor, and I said yes. And he grabbed me by the arm and pulled me into the emergency room and took me to the trauma room. And when I looked in the trauma room, there was 3 people in the room. One was the president, and he was laying on the gurney, and an extremist. And the other was Dr. Carrico, James Carrico, and one nurse. And the reason Dr. Carrico was on his own is because the Governor Conley was brought in before him, and he was very seriously ill, and the staff, all the staff in the emergency room went to help him, and then Dr. Carrico was left to take care of the president by himself. So I walked in, and he had just placed a endotracheal tube, and then I walked up and held the tube so he could connect the bird machine to it. The bird machine is an intermittent positive pressure respiratory help, and it works by filling the lungs and then letting the air come back out. And the way it works is that the inspiration continues to a certain pressure, and then the expiration continues to another low pressure, and therefore that spaces the breathing. Normally, that's about 10 or 15 minutes, 10 or 15 times during a minute, but in this case, it was going about 100 to 125 minute conversions in a minute. So it was rat-a-tat-tat-tat, and I knew the machine. Dr. Carrico knew the machine. We used it a lot. And so the question was, is the machine not working? Or is the tube blocked or what? And he had placed the tube in. And if you place an endotracheal tube, you place it between the cords, and then you know you're in the trachea and you've got an airway. But in this case, apparently we didn't have an airway. And finally, it was a question, is it the machine or what is it? And so finally it got to a point where I said, "Jimmy, what do you want to do?" And he had already made a decision. He said, "Tracheostomy, we need to do a trach." So if there was going to be a trach, well, I knew the shirt would be in the way. So I moved around to take the shirt off, and the nurse was way ahead of me with her scissors. We took the shirt off, and in the meantime, Dr. Malcolm Perry came in, and he was on the medical staff. He's a professor in the medical school, senior to Dr. Carrico, so he decided to do the tracheostomy. And then Dr. Carrico said to me, "Don, why don't you go ahead and do a cut down on that left leg? And so I went and did that. A cut down is a very small operation, but is a very important thing to do. The reason for doing it is that most people come in to the emergency room as be bled out, where their blood volume is low. And if the blood volume is low, well, then the heart doesn't have anything to pump, and that is a cause of death. Well, if you can replenish the blood volume quickly, well, then that causes a better chance of survival. So the cut down is to put a catheter in a vein so that you can get the fluid in faster. And the operation is to make an incision across the front of the shin and dissect out the saphenous vein, which is a large vein that goes right up the front of the leg. Put a catheter, make a little hole in the catheter, put the catheter in that, and then put a stitch around the vein to close it off and hold the catheter in place. The nurse, at the meantime, has the bag hanging with IV fluid in 500 cc's in a collar that she can pump up, and when she does that, well, she it forces the fluid into the vein, and so that's what I did. Then, after I did that, then Dr. Perry had already completed the tracheostomy, and I was looked up, and then the president heart had stopped or it wasn't running. They put a monitor on the president, found out his heart was not bleeding, and so external cardiac massage was being done by Kemp Clark, the chief of neurosurgery, and somebody relieved him, and Kemp Clark went and picked up the head and stopped the resuscitation. This wound is not compatible with life. You got dead quiet. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody said anything for the longest time. Then he said, okay. And he looked at, by that time, the chiefs of all the surgical services were against the wall across the room from me, and all in white coats, and they had responded to the call that they needed help. And so he said, pointed them out, I need to tell each of you individually what the wound is, so that you can say that later on. And then he described the wound as about a 3 or 4 inch hole in the posterior cranium. And then there's a bullet hole in the right temple. So he described it that the bullet came through the temple into the cranial vault, created a huge pressure in the cranial vault, and when the bullet finally tumbled into the posterior wall, it blew it out. And he explained all that individually to these 5 doctors, 7 doctors. And those doctors knew what was happening and what happened to the president and the wound that killed him. And they never were called by the Warren Commission. So that didn't work. And so after that, I stood there and I couldn't leave because Mrs. Kennedy was to my right and I couldn't get past her. So I had to just stay there for a while. But then eventually everybody left and I went around to look at the wound and I couldn't see it was laying on the pillow, but I could see where it was. Then I left there and went into an adjacent room. The X-ray waiting room was a large room. And right in the middle of the room was Lyndon Johnson. And he was telling people to go talk on the phone. And he was, obviously he'd set the government up and he had taken control. And then I looked around and I couldn't see a single person that I thought looked like Secret Service. I couldn't see any weapons that were protecting him. And so I was a little uncomfortable being there myself, because at that time we had no idea what was going on with our government. We didn't know if the government would be intact or not. But it made me feel good to know that he was right in the middle of the room and he was the president. He was absolutely fearless. Then I wondered, why is he so absolutely fearless? I mean, because if it's a coup, he'd be the next one to go. So with that, I left, and that's what I learned in the trauma room. Then later we found out that the residents and interns should not talk to each other about this. And so we didn't. And Dr. Carrico and I would have lunch together many times, often just him and me, and we never mentioned it to each other. And so one thing I'd like to get started today is that the magic bullet was a product of the Warren Commission that doesn't make any sense. And I can go through these bullets that fell on the, but I think I'm out of town.
Well, sir, just so you know, we will be giving you opportunity to go back to that because we are very interested in that, and thank you for that. Because of previous technical issues, Mr. Bolden, if you can, please give your opening statement. Chair would now like to recognize Mr. Burchett for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Dr. Curtis, what happened when the Warren Commission called you to testify about what you knew about the JFK wounds? Dr. Curtis. Yes, sir, I'm sorry. I've got hearing aids too, so don't worry about it, brother. What happened when the Warren Commission called you to testify about what you knew about JFK's wounds?
Well, the Warren Commission hasn't called me to testify at all.
Not at all? Okay.
I didn't use up all my time, and I'd like to make some additional comments regarding.
Sir, you have the time that you need, so please proceed.
Okay. Well, let me know when I can do it.
Well, now, sir, I believe Mr. Burchett has a line of questions for you,
Yes,
so you're
okay.
free to talk to Mr. Burchett.
Yes, sir. Can you explain what condition, when President Kennedy arrived in the emergency room, what was his condition at that point?
He had already died.
Okay. How many wounds did you observe on President Kennedy?
How many wounds? President Kennedy had a wound to, of course, the big wound to his head.
Right.
But he also had a wound to his throat. And I've got a little diagram here. I can point that out, how that worked, if you'd like me to.
And that wouldn't have been a single bullet wound, though, right? They talk about this magical bullet that traveled. That would have been more than one bullet, you think?
Magic bullet didn't strike the president at all.
Okay. Yeah, that was a clean bullet. I saw the picture. Do what? What? Oh, yeah, please show the diagram.
Okay. The bullets that were fired, the blue bullet was the bullet that arrived first. And you can see it started probably from the railroad trestle, which is to the southwest, and came up and first struck President Kennedy before he got out from under the tree that prevented the window shooter from shooting. Then, and we know that because the Zapruder film showed President Kennedy holding his throat in real distress when the Zapruder film started, and he had already been shot, and that wound to his throat would have killed him. It did kill him, because we know from the tracheostomy that we had to do that the bullet to his throat obstructed the trachea, and so he had taken his last breath before that. Also, the bullet that struck President Kennedy in the temple killed him also, because he just removed about a third of his brain. And the part of the brain that it removed was in the posterior part of the brain, and that is the area of the brain that controls the parasympathetic and the automatic nervous system. And so the two bullets that came from the Connolly from the window, one struck Conley, and it's the only thing that it did. It went in Conley's shoulder, went through his chest, came out of his chest, into his left wrist, into his left leg. And that indicates that the bullet was coming from the north, going southeast, southwest, and that bullet was only for Governor Conley. The other bullet that came out was this other one here. Then that would have been the magic bullet. That's the one that went in the president's back. And the Warren Commission then wanted to choose that bullet to be the magic bullet, which went through the top of his head. Now that's essentially what I wanted to say.
Okay, and that was, how many bullets did you say? 3 or 4?
That were fired?
Yes, sir.
4.
Okay, and that was a bolt-action Italian carbine.
2 of the
allegedly.
bullets came from the front.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I know, but they were trying to tell us Lee Harvey Oswald was the
only bullets that came from the window were 2 bullets, and 3 bullets came from the window. 1 hit the curb, the other hit Conley, and the other one went in the president's back. And that's well documented.
Yes, sir. Thank you, and I yield no time.
Thank you. The chair would like to now recognize Mr. Crane for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Chairwoman. Thank you guys for coming today. I want to start with you, Dr. Curtis. As a dental surgeon who was present in the hospital room the day President Kennedy was shot, you were able to observe his wounds and maybe some of his medical records. Is that correct? Can you not hear me, Dr. Curtis? So you were there in the emergency room the day that the president was brought in?
Yes.
How old were you, sir?
How old was I?
Yeah.
26.
26. And what did you observe when they brought the president in?
The president was already in the room before I arrived. And what I observed about him, that he had probably already deceased.
Since you were a dental surgeon, why did they bring you into the operation room?
That's one thing Arlen Inspector asked me, what is a dentist doing operating on the president? Then I had to qualify myself. The training that I have would encompass those particular procedures. And that's a simple procedure, and I did it well, and I just knew how to do it. There was nobody else there to do it, and I did it because Dr. Carrico asked me to do it.
Can you tell us about the wounds that you observed on the president and how they differ from what came out in some of the reporting?
The wounds on the president were to his throat and to his head and to his back. The wound to his throat would have killed him. The wound to his head definitely would have killed him. The wound to his back would not have killed him.
Did the wounds to his throat and his head look like completely separate wounds?
They were 2 separate wounds. Well, let me show it to you. The blue wound was sent from the railroad trestle all the way over to kill him right here, and that went to his throat. And the way that killed him is that it obstructed the trachea, and he couldn't breathe. So he would have been dead before he reached the hospital just simply because of that wound. The other wound that he had to his head would have killed him instantly because it removed about 1/3 of his brain.
Thank you. Mr. Hardway, I want to move to you next. You talked about the obstruction of a federal investigation that you yourself witnessed. You were on the House Select Committee for Assassination, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What year would that have been?
1977 and 1978. The obstruction occurred entirely in 1978.
What was your role in that investigation?
My role was a researcher with primary responsibility for researching Lee Harvey Oswald's activities in Mexico City and the CIA response to that.
We've heard about some of the administrative roadblocks that the CIA put up for you. Did you have any direct verbal communication with anybody at the CIA?
Oh yeah, frequently.
Can you tell us about some of those conversations and how it might have been conceived as obstruction?
Well, when we first started, we had unlimited, unexpurgated access. We had 2 clerks assigned to us. We had our office at the CIA. Pretty much went to work out there every morning. We'd ask for a file, they would go get it, we would review it. It was unredacted and given to us in its original state. After they brought George Joannides in, he began slowly tightening down the process. We were no longer working with 2 clerks who went and got us our files. We had to file formally requests through him to get the files, and we started experiencing significant delays in the files that we would get. We started noticing that the files we would get would have obvious things missing from them. Then he went so far as to actually start putting parts of the files in envelopes and leaving them in the files, so that what we would get is we would sign that we'd seen the files, but we weren't allowed to open the stuff that he had placed in envelopes. That came back to haunt us later in dealing with the final report and some of the things we were trying to get out of them, when they would tell the chairman of the committee, he's seen that, here's where he signed for the file. And I would have to explain to Chairman Stokes that, no, that was not in the file when I saw it, because that was what I was looking for, and it was not there. It must have been in one of the envelopes. And so he eventually just shut us down. It culminated on one file that I really wanted to see. When it was presented to me, Mr. Joannides showed up himself to give it to me. He was actually bouncing on his toes. Him and Scott Breckenridge brought the file to me at the CIA, called me back out there to see it. It had not just been redacted, it had been retyped with the redactions in white space as it had been retyped. It was a report on a debriefing of a certain person. I exploded. I acted like a very angry 24-year-old and had choice words for both of them, and stormed out of the office and went back to the headquarters. I subsequently, thanks to Judge Tunheim's work, saw the memorandum to the record that Mr. Breckenridge wrote, and the memorandum for the record says that the file was shown to me and, quote, no objections were recorded, close quote. Notice the way you have to watch what the CIA says. He didn't say that I didn't make any, which is what everyone infers from what he said. What he said was none were recorded, and that's because he made the record.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your leadership on this committee.
By the way, I now recognize Judge Tunheim for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Appreciate this opportunity to speak today. My name is John Tunheim. I'm a federal district court judge for the District of Minnesota. I'm in my 30th year as a federal judge. I served as chief judge of our district from 2015 until 2022, and as a member of the U.S. Judicial Conference from 2020 to 2024. I was originally nominated by President Clinton in 1995 after serving 10 years as the Minnesota's Chief Deputy Attorney General. I was chair of the Assassination Records Review Board during its entire existence from 1994 through 1998. The Review Board was an independent federal agency. Its 5 board members were confirmed by the U.S. Senate after being nominated by President Clinton. Congress created the Review Board for the express purpose of reviewing all of the still secret records of the tragic assassination of President John Kennedy and declassifying as much information as could be publicly released. The impetus for the law, which was enacted in October 1992, was Oliver Stone's movie JFK. The President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992 provided for a 5-member decision-making board which would make decisions on agency-requested redactions from classified documents. We had declassification authority. The first time and maybe the only time an outside group had that authority. The board members were, by law, to be recommended for appointment by professional organizations, 2 National Historical Associations, an Archivists Association, and the American Bar Association. Besides me, the members included a renowned provost from a major university, later university president, 2 distinguished history professors, and a senior archivist at Princeton. We were confirmed in 1994 and began our work with no appropriation or offices. We worked out of the National Archives for a time until I was able to secure some funding from the White House to get us started before Congress could provide an appropriation. The agency's presentation of records was seriously delayed because of the delay in the appointments. We were ready to begin review with our staff by early 1995. The statute did not require us to reach any conclusions about prior investigations or what happened on November 22nd. Rather, our task was to conduct a wide-ranging search for records to create the largest possible collection of assassination-related records as open to the public as possible. The goal was to allow the interested public to make up their own minds about what happened and based on an open and transparent and complete record. The congressional mandate, and this is important, it stated that the records relating to the assassination would, quote, carry a presumption of immediate disclosure, and, quote, only in the rarest of cases is there any legitimate need for continued protection. This is Congress in 1992. Congress defined the term assassination records broadly and indicated that the review board could further define the term assassination record, which we did. So in June of 1995, our definition was that any record that was reasonably related to the assassination would be an assassination record subject to the board's jurisdiction. And we included all records collected by government agencies in conjunction with any investigation or analysis of or inquiry into the assassination of President Kennedy. We developed detailed guidelines for agencies to follow, and agencies did have the right to appeal our decisions directly to the President. We were authorized to redact words. We did not ever redact entire documents. That the agency proved by clear and convincing evidence, that was a standard, that the harm of disclosure outweighed the public interest in the document in 4 categories: national security, intelligence gathering methods, personal privacy, or methods of protecting the president. That was it. We held many public hearings, experts conferences around the country in addition to our private meetings to discuss our decision-making. We also tried to clarify unclear evidence where we could, digitalizing autopsy materials and analyzing them and deposing the autopsy physicians. We also gathered artifacts, including photographs and film, clothing, and other artifacts. We had limited time to do our work, which was not enough time. We were granted just 1 more year by Congress, so we had a total of 3 years. We began to lose staff as we approached the end of our mandate. In all, the board issued over 27,000 individual rulings. These were decisions on requests by agencies to protect information. Most redacted information had release dates attached to them. We made it easy for the researchers to determine whether a redacted name appeared in different locations so that they would know it was the same person. There were a further 33,000 consent releases, which essentially means that the agency saw the handwriting on the wall and released the documents directly since we were likely to order release. When we finished, there were nearly 5 million pages at the National Archives. We made the decision early that we would not protect any information directly related to the assassination because of the high level of public interest. By 2017, when the last records were to be released under the Act, there were probably not more than 1,500 review board redactions that were remaining. The Act was clear in stating that despite the review board wrapping up its work in 1998, the Act was to continue in effect, which meant that agencies had the obligation to continue to present information. Most of the redactions now in the documents are within documents never shown to the review board, but were transferred to NARA at a later time. Agencies largely complied with the mandate to present records to the review board. However, there are many delays and denials with records that we specifically requested, and there were many skirmishes along the way. It does not take a rocket scientist to realize that agencies were awaiting the end of our 3-year mandate. The first 500 or so adverse disclosure decisions we made in FBI records were appealed to the President, and the appeals were dropped when White House counsel, former judge, and Representative Abner Mikva told the FBI to drop the appeals because President Clinton would deny all of them. FBI staff was helpful to us, but I'm now seeing records in the new releases that were not disclosed to the review board. The CIA was cooperative and processed many documents with us, but we never received much of what we specifically asked for. When asked, for example, for documents involving James Angleton that we had not seen, I was told the documents were no longer maintained as a collection. We received only 3 memoranda that incorporated the agency's review of Angleton's counterintelligence files, not the files themselves, just a review by someone else of the files. We were told that all the other documents had been destroyed. I'm now seeing a flood of documents that clearly meet the definition of assassination records involving Angleton and others that were not submitted to us for review. When CIA analysts would not tell us the details of their secret operations, our response was, okay, we'll release the record in 10 days. We then heard the details and could make a reasonable decision. We had in our hands a small file on George Joannides that disclosed nothing really, so it was returned. We didn't know the details of his work at the time. We now know much more about Joannides, and his files should be immediately disclosed. There's no reason anymore for protecting those files. Clearly, we were misled. I actually wrote to President Biden asking that he order the CIA to release the Joannides file, and I never received a response. The Secret Service was very difficult. They were the only agency that we were aware of that tried to reclassify assassination records after we were in office. They attempted to classify documents that had already been released publicly and fought us over 1963 threat sheets that was still in process when we left office. The Department of State was less than helpful, although they released records in their possession. When we negotiated with Russian officials over the Oswald files in Moscow, they did not lift a finger to help us, not even allowing us access to the United States Embassy. When we tried to get access to Belarusian records on Oswald, they did not help. When we planned meetings with Mexican and Cuban officials, they stopped us from direct contacts. The Act specifically required the Department of State to help us find foreign records. The National Archives was very helpful to us when we did our work. A very dedicated staff member, Stephen Tilley, was instrumental in getting our work done. But since we left office, I've been disappointed the Archives has not devoted more personnel to the records. We had planned that the Archives would continue our work to the extent possible. For the most part, that has not happened, and the agency has never been in contact with me. So there are other files that should be released. We came close to an agreement to copy the entire KGB file on Lee Harvey Oswald that is maintained in Minsk, Belarus. Last-minute disputes prevented the agreement from moving forward. Copies of the files are in Moscow. I just have a little bit more here. We were particularly interested in the files of Walter Sheridan, an investigator for Robert Kennedy. When we took office, he removed the files from the Kennedy Library where we had access to them and gave them to NBC for safekeeping. I don't think those files have been released. The William Manchester taped interviews of Jacqueline and Robert Kennedy are protected by a 1967 legal agreement, now controlled by Caroline Kennedy. We encouraged her to release the files, and she finally responded in August 1998 that she would not agree to their release or even let us listen to the recordings. And out there somewhere are files on Jack Ruby. We could not find them other than the files maintained by the earlier investigations. In the final report of the board, a copy of which I will give to Madam Chair today, we made 10 recommendations that are relevant today still. I won't go through them all, but they deal with the problems of excessive government secrecy, which has plagued the public's understanding of the Kennedy assassination for decades. We strongly endorsed the method selected for independent declassification of executive branch records that was used in our case, but also detailed the problems inherent in the review board's legislation. Most important, to deal with massive overclassification, we recommended a federal classification policy be developed that substantially, 1, limits the number of those in government who can actually classify federal documents, 2, restricts the number of categories by which documents might be classified, 3, reduces the time period for which documents might be classified, 4, encourages the use of substitute language to immediately open material that might otherwise be classified, and 5, increases the resources available to agencies and NARA for declassifying federal records. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, and just so everyone knows, we are going to be following up on getting that file, the KGB file in Minsk. I'm interested in seeing that, and I think that with peace talks right now, it might be prime time for that, so we will be following up on that.
It stands about 5 feet